Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Weekly Hope. I'm Kirsten Hagland. It's great to see you. If you are joining us again, if you are a return visitor, welcome back to this show. And of course, if you're here for the first time, welcome. We hope this is a wonderful place for you to learn and to feel a sense of hope and, just a place where you can be and be you. And of course, the reason that we have experts on the show is that hopefully you can learn a little something about your own recovery journey, how to help someone that you might know or love, and how to encourage and inspire others. So that's a little bit about what we do here. Thankfully, we've been doing these every single week since the beginning of June, actually, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful ride so far. Every week we have on different experts, clinicians, advocates, people with their own recovery stories, people working in the nonprofit world, just a whole lot of people from a wide variety of sectors within the eating disorder field and the field of mental health. And we bring them on to talk about different topics, to answer your questions. And so that's another thing that I just want to make sure before I introduce our guest is to let you know that this is really about creating a forum for you to ask questions. So if you've got something on your mind, if you have a thought you want to share, a comment or a question, please feel free at any time throughout the show to type into the comment section and let us know what you're thinking and feeling. And, if we are able to get your question, and we absolutely want to do that. So make sure to ask us your questions. Deborah says hello. Hey, Deborah, good to see you here again. Thanks so much for joining us again. Oh, and also just have to have a little hello from Elsa. This is my nugget. This is my little girl. And she's my unofficial co-host for the show. For those of you who've been around, you know that she's always here being my lap dog and my lovely little friend here. So she just basically sleeps through every episode, but I always bring her on because who doesn't love animals? But she welcomes you too. Just one more thing before I introduce our guest, and we've got a really, really cool topic to dive into today. I just wanted to recognize that today is World Mental Health Day. And I was really meditating upon this morning because I wanted to post some things on social media and of course on Twitter and Facebook and such to honor this day and to talk about it. But what I thought was really interesting, and I was meditating on it, was the fact that it's not Mental Illness Awareness Day, or it's not, Mental Health Issue Day. It's World Mental Health Day. And what I liked about that was the focus on health. And that it is so, so important that we look at mental health in the same way we look at physical health. I mean, it seems our culture is obsessed with physical health. Oftentimes equating that to thinness, which is the whole disordered eating problem we'll talk a little bit more about today. But so focused on what can I do to be healthy so that I can live a long life, and what are all the things you don't do now so that you can live into your 80s or 90s and get to see your children and grandchildren grow up and all these wonderful things. It's all about the physical health. Why don't we think about cultivating mental health in the same way? See, we shouldn't wait until someone gets sick in order to say, oh my goodness, you need treatment, like you do with cancer or diabetes, and it's this big crisis. And then the person needs very, very severe acute care, right? We want to do preventative things physically so we don't get there. Well, why don't we do the same thing for our mental health? And so while I think that this is a really good day to be aware, to try to make those who are struggling with a mental health issue to feel that they're not alone, to feel that they're not stigmatized and they shouldn't be ashamed. But at the same time, we should take stock of our own mental health and say, what am I doing every single day to make sure that I'm preventing, right, something in the future that could potentially come along and catastrophize my life if I don't take care of my mental health and well-being now? And it's a lesson that I've had to learn a couple different times in my life, but I can say over the last couple of years have really, really identified key ways, because I know myself and I know my struggles, and I know where the temptation is and where the triggers are. I know and have learned some really, really amazing skills, and I'm so thankful for that I have learned them now to be able to cultivate mental health and well-being so that challenges and circumstances and biological factors don't come in and take over and overwhelm. And actually, if you want to read more about that, you can go to my personal Facebook page, where I just wrote a super long essay. I didn't mean for it to be that long. It just got that long. I just kept typing. So it's there if you want to read a little bit more of that. But just want to wish you all a very happy World Mental Health Day, and say let's use it for good and for positivity, and really spread the light. So with that, oh, and Deborah Schlesinger says, hi, Nugget. Yes, she's my Nugget. It's not her name, but that's what I call her. Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to bring in our guest. She's now on the other side of the screen there. Simone Seitz, welcome to the show. Simone is the executive director of the Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders, which is a nonprofit, and she is joining us live from Asheville, North Carolina, right?
Woo, finally. We had some technical difficulties there for a minute.
Thanks, know. Yeah, absolutely. And I just have to say, Asheville, and I was telling you this before, is one of my all-time favorite places in the United States. It's so gorgeous. So how long have you lived there?
I arrived in 1997 from Miami. A big shift. But I get to say I'm a local now. I think once you hit 10 years, you're allowed to say you're a local.
I think that's about right. That's what they always say for New York. And so I'm sure it probably applies everywhere else too. So to begin, before we dive into our topic, why don't you tell us, if people don't know, because Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders, you guys are all over social media, all over the web, and do some really, really great stuff. So why don't you start by letting people know a little bit about the organization and what you do?
Sure. We are a nonprofit that actually was established in 2004, and our name used to be the Center for Disordered Eating. So some people get confused. We just changed our name this year. And with that, just refining our focus and our mission and really identifying the need that's out there so we can scale to meet that need. So we provide education, resources, and support for disordered eating and recovery from eating disorders. And it's important to really emphasize the, awareness of disordered eating piece, because just to speak to what you were saying about prevention and getting on the front end, the more we know on the front end, the more we can help to offset some of the challenges that people have if they don't have that information. So that's our main goal, is to do a lot of education and outreach, and of course, support folks who need us.
Yeah, absolutely. What groups do you find have the least amount of awareness about this issue and the complexities of it that really should?
Wow, I might get in trouble for answering this one. Doctors?
No. Wait, who did you say?
Doctors?
Doctors. No, girl, preach. No, You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the group of people that are the most difficult to reach, not because they don't want the information, but they're also inundated with everything that's best practice and what they need to do. And their time's just as busy as well. So we often talk about, when we do our education and outreach, how to attract the doctors, the physicians, to get them in to come to our trainings. And it's an ongoing challenge we're trying to address. So what we're doing is trying to get to their offices and their frontline staff and their practice managers. So at least the information's getting in.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Did we freeze again?
I think we were frozen for a second, but I think we are slowly coming back. I could hear everything you were saying. Okay. So, and so far as online groups or support groups and things like that, what do you guys have to offer? I put the link to the website in the comments, so if people want to go and check it out. And you have a beautiful new website too. It's just gorgeous and really, really super helpful. So I hope people will go there and check it out.
Thank you. Yes, we have adult support group. That's every Wednesday from 6 to 7. And we do family support group, which it's not just families, it's loved ones. It's anyone who's involved with someone who's struggling is welcome to come to that. That group, though, is not for someone who's actually in recovery. It's for the families and loved ones. And that's the first and third Monday of every month. And ideally, as we grow and develop our resources, I'd love to be able to have more of an online presence to offer folks support who can't get to us. Because while we do serve the state of North Carolina, there are obviously people who can't get to us. So that's a goal we have as well, so we can reach those folks.
Yeah. Do you see also, though, people coming in from, because I know from being there and living in the South for a while, that's very close to Georgia and South Carolina as well. I'm sure you get people from kind of around the region.
We do. We're hitting a lot in South Carolina, and we're talking with the nonprofit in South Carolina about how to merge our services so we can better support them, because we're very small, but they're really, really small. Nonprofit. A lot of us are run by one person. So collaborating with the other nonprofits is just key because we're doing the same work. So we get a little bit from Tennessee, not as much. But again, it's just how we develop and really strengthen the foundation of what we have in Western North Carolina so that we then can get ready to scale up and meet the need across the state and through South Carolina.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. Well, we're going to dive into nonprofit collaboration a little bit later because I know that's something that you're very passionate about. I am as well, having started a nonprofit myself, so I know how that goes. Mandira has a question, actually. I just want to, Mandira says, do you provide online training to people willing to work in prevention of eating disorders or positive body image?
We don't have online training right now, but we do have CE professional development. We do our conference every year, the HEAL conference, and we've switched that to be the last day of NIDA Awareness Week. So we do that, and we also do CE trainings throughout the year, but nothing online yet. Again, that's an area that we need to be able to grow into. But also, all of our social media, like we do a lot that way.
We do a ton.
Yeah. So the messaging is getting out there, and we're growing that base of folks so that we're ready to, plug in when we're ready to gear up for that. I don't know if you can hear me. You're frozen.
Okay, we're back. Sorry, friends. I apologize. Thanks so much for sticking in there with us. Really, really appreciate it. Okay, so but yes, so I'm sure that people can find all of the events and CE things and the conference and all that information online at your website, right?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. Okay, so with that, and if you're just joining us, just to recap, we've got Simone Seitz here. She's the Executive Director of the Carolina Resource Center for Eating Disorders in Asheville, North Carolina. And she's joining us, and we're going to dive into the topic now of disordered eating versus eating disorders, and want to welcome you to please say hello, tell us your name, where you're signing in from, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them throughout the show. So just touching base if you're joining us and you didn't hear the first bit of the broadcast. So Simone, you wrote a really, really great article recently, actually, for a magazine there in North Carolina about disordered eating versus eating disorders. And it's a question that I actually get, I've gotten a lot from people who are just starting to learn about eating disorders. And it often comes in the form of, okay, where is the line? Meaning, what if I notice myself or someone else just struggling with a few eating disorder behaviors or doing weird things with food or exercise, but it's not affecting their entire life? Where is the line? It's almost like this question that it's probably going to sound horrible, but like teenagers say, when you say don't go too far, like what's too far? What's the line? What is the real difference? And we know that there's the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for eating disorders, but what's the difference between disordered eating and an eating disorder?
Two main things I want to say. One is that you're going to look at the intention behind the behaviors and the behaviors around those choices. So anything that we do to an extreme, that's kind of a cue. So we can engage in something like, let's say, you just know that you feel healthier, maybe doing some behavior. That's your choice for quality of quality of life. If the frequency and the intensity increases and it's starting to affect your day-to-day life, that's that's your cue. That's the warning sign. So, and it's really, we all are making constant decisions about nourishment and movement all of the time. And the image and the messaging that comes into us is nonstop. So it's an ongoing challenge to really just check in with yourself and say, what feels good to me? How do I feel nourished? What food does that for me? What movement does that for me? And then hearing an external message that kind of makes you question your own innate ability to make those choices and to have your own cues. So to me, and I'm going to the caveat is I'm not a clinician. However, this is my life, my profession, and my passion. So I'm very aware of a lot of these things. I just don't want to sound like there are actually people who are trained in this that I can help refer to. But my own personal experiences, figuring out when it is becoming something that is affecting your quality of life and the intensity and frequency of it. And then the other point I was going to make is eating disorders are not choices. We know this. There's a genetic predisposition that is not our choice. So you can engage in behaviors, and then, we talk about the triad. There are, the chip that we might have in us of the behaviors and the predisposition, and then the environmental factors, and then something happens in life that's a trigger, and it could be something minor. It could be like you move. It could change schools, change of life for a lot of women who are older, where we feel out of control, and that perfect storm happens, and then we move into eating disorder. So if we're just aware of all of the behaviors that are disordered behaviors, dieting, limiting and restricting, excessive exercise to control the shape or size of our body, which we all know you can't do. All of those behaviors, are just like the pot of juice just waiting, for trouble.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I was clear about that, but I really think the main thing is the frequency and intensity.
Yeah, no, that's extremely helpful. We've talked about diets a few times before on this show, and talked just very recently about the Wake Up Weight Watchers campaign and the whole saga that's been happening with that. Can anyone be on a diet and it not be disordered eating? Isn't dieting disordered eating in and of itself?
It is. So anything that we do to go against our natural behaviors of cues to eat and what we need, for, again, nourishment, food and exercise wise, movement wise, that when we're messing with our genetic disposition, that's restrictive, and restriction is disordered. So, which doesn't mean, obviously, if you have a doctor who's telling you you have a diagnosis and you need to adhere to that, there's no one saying you shouldn't do that. That is for your health. That is for your well-being. But if you're doing it to change the shape or size of your body, that's disordered.
Yeah. And also I think it has, and you talked about external messages, and I'd love for you to talk about that more. I remember, a lot of, for about the last 10 years, most of the work that I've done has been, speaking and then work from home, and, not like going into an office 9 to 5. It's just been a different kind of work. And I did have a stint a couple of years ago where I was going into an office every day. And what was so interesting was that right around New Year's, everyone started like busting out these weight loss teas and, talking all about like shaming themselves in the kitchen into what they were eating and not eating and all this kind of stuff. And I've been in such an eating disorder world bubble for a while now that you forget that's highly normalized, And what was so interesting to me was that it's all so faddish. It's all so product driven. It's all so drink this, eat that, do this, like this fad. Oh, that's the new thing that it'll magically. And it's amazing that people still believe it.
Right. And anything that we do that's an external thing to try to make ourselves feel better, even if you're not speaking about, eating disorders, it could be folks who engage in substance abuse, or if they're shopping or gambling, whatever we're trying to do to make ourselves feel better. And we know the underlying issue is that we're in pain, and we're trying to ease that pain. And so folks who have disordered eating issues, it's even more challenging because we know this, you can't quit eating. You have to learn how to live with this. And that's why the journey to recovery is so long and so hard. because you can get pretty far and then a new message comes in and you're kind of like, oh, maybe that'll make me feel good. And if it hits you on one of those days when you're feeling out of control or you're just not feeling good about yourself, again, it's that perfect storm. So it's an ongoing journey.
Yeah. And you know what, you, when we talked before, you said, that you do this work because you're very passionate about it, but there's also a personal element to this for you. Do you feel comfortable talking a little bit about that?
Sure. I usually don't, just because I want to make sure that people know that they can trust me on a professional level. But then I think about it a lot, and I think how, the credibility factors there if folks know that I'm dealing with it too. My whole life, I've had threads of disordered eating, behavior, and body image issues. I mean, I honestly don't know anyone who hasn't had some degree. I think it's a spectrum, and we all live with it. Yeah. But I was able to kind of fly under the radar of people thinking I had a significant problem because I've always been average to a little bit larger in size. So because I didn't look like I had an eating disorder, nobody paid attention to the fact that I was engaging in disordered behaviors. And in Asheville, speaking of Asheville, it's really, really easy to fall into the whole clean eating, I'm healthy, that whole thing. And, that's kind of where I landed and stayed for a while. And again, people would actually, they'd admire my behaviors because I would eat clean or restrict or do a cleanse or something like that. I've always been involved in the eating disorder world in some capacity. But when I took the role on, it was really interesting because the more I was learning and the more I was hearing, I had to call myself on some of the behaviors that I was continuing to have, and I mean, again, I rode under the radar. So I could stay with my pretty package of, I'll just eat, I'll do a cleanse or something. Mm-hmm. So this past year, it's been really interesting because I took it on myself and being willing to, take that journey and perhaps be in a body that I didn't think I would like, to try to find that place of health and not go through the pendulum of restriction to indulgence, which is kind of like the dietitian I work with, she has a pendulum she talks about that they're the extremes, so your extreme restriction, there's no doubt you're going to fly over it eventually and get to the indulgence piece. And that our goal isn't that you're going to live in complete balance all the time, because that's not realistic. Right. But to lower the swing, engage in some food. It's okay to emotionally eat sometimes. It's okay to enjoy food just for pleasure sometimes. And it's also okay to say, hey, I might not be feeling so vital right now. So, I'm going to shift what I'm doing. But it's the extremes. I was living in an extreme land. So I would do a cleanse, think I was feeling great, but it would slowly creep back. And it was, we talk a lot about set point and really trusting. And that's where I'm living right now, just to figure out what is my set point. Yeah. And step into the fear and step into the pain and trust that on the other side, there's going to be freedom, because living a life of restriction is not a life. No. And so it's been even a little more challenging for me because I'm in this role. Because part of treatment, when folks go through treatment, is part of what they're told is to stop reading and those external messages. And I have to really filter through, and compartmentalize what I'm doing for professional purpose and what I'm doing for personal. Yeah. And again, I don't have a full-blown eating disorder, but I'm definitely on the spectrum, just like most people I know. Yeah. And I'm doing the work too. And it's scary, but this is one of the beautiful things about nonprofits or treatment, private practice providers or treatment centers. It's such a compassionate, supportive, nurturing community.
Yes.
That, no matter who you are or where you are, when you step into this journey, we're there. And, and that's, kind of leads a little bit into the nonprofit stuff, and why it's so vital that we all collaborate and we network, because services are not cheap,
Yeah. And Yeah, you know what? Can I just pause you though for 1 second, because it got some really cool comments, and I just wanted that have come up in the midst of your talking and sharing your story. So I just want to get them in. But before I do that, about the collaboration bit, I just want to pull up what Melody here says. She says, I graduated recently on clinical psychology from India and want to work in eating disorder issues here, which is amazing, Melody. That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. And she says she's looking for some organizations who can provide us funds to organize a workshop and awareness program on a local level in India. Do you have any ideas or know any organizations who support local NGOs in developing countries with eating disorders? I'm really struggling on this part and would great help if you could share some. I know that actually that's a really, really great question, Melody. And I know that there are some international organizations that do aid with that. And if you want, actually, you can send us a message to our Eating Disorder Hope Facebook page, and I can send you via email some links of some organizations. But Simone, do you have any thoughts on that?
Really, I don't know what treatment providers are accessible in other countries, but, once you tap into the folks who are doing this for a living, that's that whole collaboration piece. They jump in and they want to support. So if it's a treatment center, they might be able to help subsidize or underwrite. I think that because you have the connections with the whole international piece, and I don't. I just know at the national level, we tend to go to our large national organization to try to bridge those gaps. And that for us, it's National Eating Disorders Association. So. Yeah.
And I would, and I would even reach out to them, Melody. That's the National Eating Disorders Association. Obviously, I know they're based here in the United States, but they are really, really interested, especially in underserved populations. Obviously, they would be considered minorities here in the United States. Obviously, they're not minorities in India, but about helping to kind of break down the barriers and the stigma or the assumption that eating disorders are just a white Western problem, which it is absolutely not. And I know that, and we've got an online conference coming up in December, actually, where we're focusing specifically on underserved populations with eating disorders, and focusing on the cultural issue and the fact that people think it's just rich white women, and it is so not, and that there's stories of women from India and Asia and Africa and the Middle East have not been heard. So props to you. Send us a Facebook message, and I'll try to help you out on that. Also want to bring on Gina here. She says, can you speak to the person who has been large his or her entire life, who as an adult has continued to love food, eat whenever and whatever, yet their size grows to a point that they now have diabetes or other diseases of quote unquote obesity, which thank you for putting that in quotes, because it's an interesting disease. Does this person have to diet, restrict, and exercise to get to a size that is healthier? Thanks. So that's Gina. Can you see her comment up on the screen there?
Yeah. So, and that's like a kind of a disclaimer caveat with this whole journey of figuring out what your set point is and where your quote unquote healthy size is. Because it's not a license to just not take care of your health. It's not like saying, okay, I'm just going to like unleash and do whatever I feel like doing. It's removing the restrictions so you can bring in all types of foods, all types of movement, and make reasonable health choices for yourself. If your doctor is diagnosing you with if you have a diagnosis or an illness and there are your levels might need to be, you need to look at your levels, and there are things to do with movement or food that will help you become healthier. That's not saying it's necessarily your size or your weight. It's saying there's something that we need to look at, that we need to address internally. So I don't know if I'm speaking, properly to this, but I want to be really clear that it's removing the stigma and the bias and the shame related to shape and size and weight is the part that we're talking about. BMI, we talk about that all over the place, that it's not a number we need to listen to. We need to know when we're feeling healthy and vital and agile, and when you're sharp, and when you can produce during the day, and whatever size or shape you are to do that. the caveat is if there is a medical diagnosis that needs to be addressed, then that is something that needs to be looked at. That might be a tweak to bring a level down, you know, or a level up. And that's really just learning how to bring in all categories of food and move and make healthy choices. Did I address that?
Yeah, no, I think that was really great. Yeah, I think that was really nice. And Manita here has a great question. I'm going to let you answer that question. I got to step and go get my laptop charger, just make sure I don't lose battery here.
Okay.
So I'm going to put you on the screen and let you answer this. So Manita says, can you speak to the person who thinks thin is only attractive and perfect? Yeah.
Yes. Because I, you know, can say I've had that experience myself, you know, and I also speak to people every day, all day long, and this is a goal for them. And, you know, that's checking in with, is that really true? And asking yourself, is that really true? Because when you really dig deep, you might discover that that's not so. You know, we all have what we find attractive and appealing, but the level of perfection and us trying to attain something that is not attainable, that's the issue that we really try to address. You know, if you're trying to make yourself look like somebody else, if it's a comparison thing, or if it's an ideal that you have in your head that could have been something that's internal that you've thought, or again, another external idea, like if you're looking on Instagram at all kinds of bodies and you think you want to look like that body, really just digging down and saying, you know, these are my genetics, this is my shape, this is my size, this is where I'm healthy, and learning, you know, acceptance around that, which is, again, a long journey because of the messages coming in. So it's actually interesting, if I'm going to just like sidetrack for a moment, because the whole body positivity idea and body love, it's actually something that we talk about a lot on the professional level. And getting realistic that you might never feel the love or positivity. Our goal is acceptance, to say, you can't change, you know, your genetics. You have to learn how to find happiness within and engage in behaviors that make you feel, again, healthy and vital.
Yeah.
So, you know, I hope I spoke to that.
Yeah, no, you definitely did. That's awesome. You know, and the other thing about, and Gina says, thanks. So thanks, Gina, that she was the one who asked the question about being in a larger body. So yeah. And, you know, to that point too, that's something I mean, I really struggled with loving parts of my body that I'd hated for years. But I would say what I have come to love, or the way that I think about body love now, or body positivity, is that like when I go on a run, that like, because I broke my ankle a couple years ago, I'm just a total klutz, and so I broke my ankle. First broken bone in my life after dancing for 18 years. And the first broken bone was not dancing or doing anything very dangerous, but had surgery, and then was, you know, laid up for 3 or 4 months. Had to go around New York City on crutches in one of those knee like wheeler chairs where you just put your knee on the one cushion part of the chair and you wheel around.
Yep.
It was horrible. Because I had gotten so used to having my mobility and having 2 legs that worked. And that made me really step back and go, wow, I can love my legs for how they carry me to the grocery store, to a friend's house, to the subway so I can get to work. I mean, just the fact that they can move and take me up and down stairs. Do you know how jealously I looked at people who walked up and down stairs when I was on my stupid wheeler? And I just had a broken ankle that was going to get better in 3 or 4 months, you know? And so it really made me realize, same with my arms or my hand, or you ever cut yourself cooking something and then you can't use your thumb for like a week and you're like, gosh, I really need that. You know, when I can't use it, or it hurts when I touch everything, like, gosh, I really realized I should be grateful for my thumb. It's like, we should be so grateful for the things that our body can do. And yeah, I might not like love the shape of my thighs, but gosh darn it, I can walk around New York City or any other city in this country where I live now for hours because my legs can carry me. And like, if I don't have gratitude and love for that, like, I'm I'm crazy.
Well, and that also goes to like, and I think we all do this when we look back to what maybe where I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and to be like, was I happy then? Or what my perceived happiness. And now when you look at where you are and you're kind of like, well, I wish I would have appreciated where I was then because, I had all of these things at that point. And I don't want to use size and shape because that's not okay. But we all do it. We look back at a picture and say, wow, I wish I would have appreciated where I was because, I was vital and I was, doing all of these things. And maybe now as you age and, it's like harder to get up or you can't, walk as far, wow, I wish I would have appreciated what my body has done for me and carried me through this life. That being said, it's easy to say, but I get how hard it is to do.
Yeah.
Because every day you're walking around in your body and constantly, reconciling where you feel, how you feel and what you feel. And then again, there's that message that might come in right at the wrong time. Or, you can feel great. And then you just so happen to see yourself in a window of a store or you,
yes.
Or you feel great and then you see a picture of yourself and everything just shifts. And it's the perception, which again, and I'm not a clinician, but goes back to pain and fear and another issue that's underneath that once we realize we're engaging in something about our capsule, there's really something else going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen, sister. Manita wrote another really great comment about her work in Nepal. And so, Simone, it's quite long. So I'll let you go back through the comments and you can read it later. And, Manita, thank you so much. Awesome work that you're doing. And I want to talk to you more about that later, but I do want to just get the first little bits of, your question here and Simone can talk about them. And then, Manita says, she asks, asking, how can I help myself and people around me to love their body and accept it? What can we do on a local level? Is the word fat bad? Is it bad that people say fat, or is it bad if we add a bad emotion? That's interesting. And then she goes on to talk about her work in Nepal. So, we'll talk about that. We can talk about that later. But before you jump in here, Simone, I just want to say, like, one of the things that I have learned, because she asked, what can we do on the local level? And I think because I think we get so caught up in, like, how can I make big changes? And big changes are very important, obviously, right? We all get motivated by that. But sometimes the best thing you can do is, one, monitor and reflect on the way that you think about yourself and others just in your own head without even the words that you speak. And then how do we practice valuing the people in our lives, our moms, our dads, our brothers, our sisters, our colleagues, like the people that we interact with on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And sometimes maybe having a hard conversation or diving into life with them, doing life with them, showing them whatever they're struggling with or they're going through is valid, being there, being a listening ear, being a teammate, being a support, being a friend, like that on a very local, very basic level. I feel like, and I feel like I've seen, has made more of a difference than sometimes doing a Twitter campaign, that's just a thought that I have. But Simone, your thoughts, and especially about the word fat being bad. I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Well, two things. One, at the local level and at the very foundation of all of it is, again, with eliminating bias and stigma and shame, we just have to talk. It's amazing what happens when you just open the door. And that's how I know most people deal with something, because I talk about it all the time. So that's like very local level, foundational, like just being accepting of people and whatever they have to say. And if they choose to use a word in a negative way, not judging that either, So there's a whole, the whatever you attach to whatever word, I laugh about it because I can remember times in my life where I've said out loud, I don't want to be fat. Of course, people say that, that's what messaging is. And now, because I'm immersed in this world, I have to catch my own bias and my own stigma. We all do. As professionals, we talk about it all the time because everybody lives with it. Yeah. So we're all working on the same thing, how to destigmatize, pull out, the criticism and the judgment, and start having not just acceptance of ourselves, but of, like you're saying, everybody else and wherever they are. So fat has been a dirty word for a lot of people, but fat's also not for a lot of people. A lot of people actually put so much emphasis and positivity to living in that, because that's the body that they choose. Yeah. So if you're choosing that, and that's where your health level is and where you're vital, there's, it's not negative. Yeah. So it's kind of like any word that you say is, and I actually joke with some people, because we're like, when we look at the cute little baby, we say, what a cute chubby baby. Like, it's not negative.
Right. Exactly.
We're like, look at that baby's healthy and thriving, and it's chubby and it's cute. Or we say, look at that fat baby. Yeah. So it's whatever you put on it. If someone is using that word with you and it's painful, you get to advocate for yourself, and you get to say, that's where we have to work on our own voice and our own beliefs. And first we have to get okay and accepting, but then we also have to advocate, which brings back to the first thing, which is actually how we work at the local level. No, I'm not going to listen to you when you say that word, I don't like it. I mean, yeah. So, and that's a really great question, because there's a documentary that's out right now that we actually screened this past Awareness Week. It's called Fatitude, and it's a really, if you have the chance to see it, it's a really great movie, because it addresses an entire community of people who live in larger bodies, and they're fighting against, people assuming that they're unhealthy because they live in a larger body, and they are not, or they choose, you get to choose.
Yeah.
I don't
the other thing that I think is cool to think about is that when people say, or as you say, you have said, like, oh, in the past, I don't want to be fat. And obviously I said that all the time when I was in my eating disorder. I think it's not that it's always covering up something deeper. Mm-hmm. And that transcends culture or country or language. That fear of being fat is a fear of something deeper. It's a fear of being unlovable. It's a fear of being perceived as lazy or unworthy. It's a fear of, worthlessness, or not being significant or attractive or desirable in any way, not just sexually or physically. So there's something underneath that word that people are afraid of. And so that's why I think, like, yes, it's so important to talk about the physical as we're doing, but at the same time too, it's like, no, these are underlying human, gritty, raw issues,
But, full circle to the beginning of our conversation, when your thing is food and exercise, as opposed to
manifests.
Right. And whatever the behavior is, as opposed to maybe alcohol or shopping or whatever. TV. When your thing is food and exercise, it is that much more difficult, because it is the area that society puts most pressure on. So you're not just fighting yourself, your own internal issues, but you're also trying to live in a world that might not accept, what you look like. And that's where our work is. So it's working on ourselves, and then working, to eliminate that shame and that stigma and that bias, so that we all just start to really go back to valuing, us as human beings and what we bring to this world and our essence, and that doesn't mean you're not going to have days that you don't feel good,
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Even people without eating disorders have days where they look at themselves and they don't like what they look like. That's human.
Of course. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So many awesome questions, you guys. Thank you so much. And I just want to let Manita know too. Thank you so much for the work you're doing in Nepal. I mean, wow. It's really, really incredible. And it's something that I try to tell people all the time. And when I've talked to lawmakers on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. in the United States, that this is a major problem. This is an increasing problem all over the world. This is not just not just a Western issue. So Simone, this has it's been a lot longer than I told you originally we were going to talk. So thank you so much. Excuse me. Do you want to just, to wrap us up here, talk a little bit about the things that you've learned insofar as like how important it is to collaborate with other nonprofits and other people seeking to do advocacy, and what that journey has been like for you so far, and why you're so passionate about it.
Sure. The only way we're going to affect change is if we all join together. It's a movement, there's strength in numbers. That's probably somebody's quote or whatever, but I'm just taking it. Advocacy doesn't mean you have to go to your state or to your, or to the national thing. Advocacy can happen locally. Advocacy can happen at a doctor's office when you walk in and they tell you that they need you to weigh yourself, and you can say no, unless it's required for a disease or a medicine. No, I mean, it can be that simple, which is not simple because I've actually had trouble with doctors myself telling them I'm not going to weigh. But advocacy is so important because that's the only way we're going to change. And there are so many things that you can do at the local level with your local nonprofit, or reach out to the national organization, NIDA. If you don't have a local nonprofit, there are things that can be done. Even if that's volunteering to stuff envelopes for a direct appeal, there's anything that you can do is really important. The other thing I was going to say is why it's so important for nonprofits to align and collaborate is it's really difficult to get funding in the world of eating disorders because of that stigma that it's a choice and that it's the Caucasian rich girl disease, and that really identifying that it is a mental illness and getting funding is vital. So the more that the nonprofits collaborate and overlap and provide the services and help one another, the more our voice will be heard and we can affect some change. So, and again, that goes, whatever people are willing to do is helpful. We're fighting against, it's like, pushing the ball up the hill, because people don't realize that it is a mental illness, and it's really important that we all join together. Most of the nonprofits, the folks that I know, we're all offices of one, and we're mostly, volunteer supported, and that's, maybe one day that'll change and funding will become more accessible, but that's where we are. So a lot of donation dollars are private donations of folks who have actually experienced an eating disorder in their family. And while we're extremely grateful for that, it shouldn't be that way. An eating disorder is just as life-threatening as a cancer. And, we really need to bring that attention to it. So I hope that by, and we all kind of live in a silo when we're in the world of nonprofits. And the more we get together, the stronger we're going to get. And, one of the things that we're doing is a network of nonprofits for next year is we're actually rolling out a no diet day. So we're all joining together and we got to start somewhere, right? So we're all getting together and doing that in May. So that'll be great. Again, back to the messaging that diets are precursors for eating disorders. And, that's where we got to start. So thank you so much for having me on here.
Simone, this is you're the perfect person to answer so many of these really great questions. So thank you so much. It was a joy. And like I said, I'm going to be putting some more links throughout the comments section, so that you can find out more about Carolina Resource Center for eating disorders, and more about the work of Simone, and also some articles as well from Eating Disorder Hope on disordered eating. So they will be hopefully helpful to you. But Simone, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to say goodbye to you, and then I'm going to say goodbye to everyone.
Okay.
So,
thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Bye. So, you guys, thank you so much. This was really, really rich today. Wow, wow, wow. So many great questions and comments. Thank you so much. And I loved the international perspective that we had at play here. It's nice. Simone is in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm sitting here in Germany. You guys are, I'm not sure if you are signing in fact, from India or Nepal, or if you're just writing about your work there, but to have your voices as a part of this conversation, especially on World Mental Health Day, right? That we're recognizing this is a global issue. Have your perspective is just really, really amazing. So thank you so much. And I just want to bring up Nabina's comment real quick and just answer it. Nabina says, I'm overweight according to society and bombarded with so many negative messages in my life. How do I do self-care and accept myself? How to ignore these negative messages when I'm bombarded with negative comments about my looks and weight when those comments are from people close to me? Nabina, I just want to say, I'm so sorry that that's your experience. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. You are beautiful just the way you are, and just the way you were created to be. And just because other people don't see it doesn't mean it's not true. And I know it can be incredibly difficult to find that inner strength to believe and know that you are worthy and valuable, whether other people see your beauty or not. But it takes practice. And so I would either, I'm not sure if you're working with a therapist or talking to someone who might be able to help you with this, but find things that you can do or that you can meditate on, which do make you feel good, do make you feel whole, right? That's an element of self-care and acceptance, practicing. We had someone, a guest on a couple weeks ago, who talked about actually like holding herself and practicing self-love in that way, that she was not ashamed to touch her skin and touch her body and hold herself. To practice self-care. Maybe it's walks through nature. Maybe it's, listening to music that takes you to another place. Maybe it's journaling. But making an effort to identify first and then practice those self-care mechanisms, right? Because we can say, oh, I know what self-care is, but to actually practice them is something that we need to do daily to cultivate that. And so I just want to encourage you to do that and to just practice a sense of acceptance. And you might not feel it every day, and it might not be a fast process, but I promise when you put the work in and you make that choice and you keep doing it over a long stretch of time, your mind can change. And often your confidence then will inspire others to do the same, because often a lot of times people who are negative to us are people who are indeed very much in pain or struggling with themselves. So, Nabina, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you, everyone. We will see you tomorrow. Actually, we've got another episode of Weekly Hope coming up tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern, so hopefully you will join us back then. Please, of course, feel free to share this video with anyone that you think might need it or might be inspired by it. We're here to share these resources for all of you. So have a wonderful, beautiful, blessed day wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you tomorrow. All right, bye.